Open with high tension, Vincent humiliates Ruth at the dinner table, calling her worthless trash. The audience feels the sting of public shame and the suspense of Ruth's calm, deliberate reaction. Set the stage for an explosive reversal where quiet dignity turns into devastating revenge. The clinking of silverware against fine china filled the dining room, a low hum of conversation blending with the laughter of Vincent Morrison's sprawling family. The long mahogany table gleamed under the glow of the chandelier, each place setting arranged with military precision. 23 relatives had gathered for Vincent's 65th birthday, and the atmosphere carried the stiff energy of an event where appearances mattered more than comfort. I sat quietly halfway down the table, my fork poised over a plate of roast beef I hadn't yet touched. My husband Isaac sat beside me, making polite conversation with his cousin, while Vincent held court at the head of the table, as he always did. His voice boomed, filling the room with stories of his latest business triumphs, sprinkled with exaggerated laughter and self-congratulations. It was nothing new. Vincent Morrison thrived on being the loudest, the smartest, the most important man in the room. Tonight, however, his attention turned toward me. "You're worthless trash, and my son deserves better than you," Vincent declared, his words cutting through the chatter like a slap. For a moment, time stopped. My fork hovered halfway to my mouth, my hand frozen in knitter. Conversation died instantly. Every head turned toward me. The chandeliers cast harsh shadows across Vincent's weathered face, making the disdain etched into his expression look almost theatrical. A hot flush crept up my neck, but I forced myself to stay still, my breathing steady. Around the table, the silence grew unbearable. Patricia, Vincent's wife, looked horrified, her eyes darting nervously between me and her husband. Isaac went pale, his mouth opening as if to speak, then closing again. His sisters studied their plates as though they had suddenly become fascinating. Even the youngest cousin, normally incapable of sitting still, had gone silent, sensing the heavy shift in the air. The insult hung in the air, suffocating and undeniable. This wasn't just a jab, it was a public declaration, delivered in front of every relative. In Vincent's mind, I had been weighed, measured, and discarded like garbage. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I refused to let him see me break. Slowly, deliberately, I set my fork back on the plate. I reached for my napkin, folding it neatly and placing it beside my untouched meal. My hands didn't shake, though every nerve in my body screamed to lash out, to scream, to demand the respect I deserved. But no, that wasn't my way. Instead, I lifted my chin and spoke softly, my voice steady and controlled. "You're absolutely right, sir." A ripple of confusion passed through the table. Some relatives looked up sharply. Others frowned. Vincent leaned back, a smug grin forming, certain he had won. He believed his words had crushed me. I rose gracefully from my chair, smoothing the front of my dress. "Excuse me," I said, my tone polite, almost detached. I stepped back from the table, turning without another word. As I crossed the dining room, I could feel the weight of 23 pairs of eyes tracking my every movement. Isaac finally spoke, his voice strained. "Ruth, wait." But I didn't stop. I moved toward the heavy oak front door, my heels clicking softly against the polished floor. The Victorian house loomed around me, its ornate moldings and antique fixtures symbols of Vincent's pride. Pride he thought belonged entirely to him. Pride he had no idea I had secretly financed. No one knew the truth, not even Isaac. Not one person at that table realized that the anonymous investor who had rescued Vincent's struggling company, who had poured millions into his grand projects, was the same woman walking silently out of the room. The same woman he had just called worthless trash. I reached the entryway, retrieved my purse from the side table, and paused just long enough to glance back. Through the wide archway, I could see Vincent gesturing animatedly, already spinning his narrative of why his outburst had been justified. His face flushed with the thrill of dominance, oblivious to the storm he had just unleashed. Patricia's face burned with embarrassment. Isaac's eyes pleaded silently, but he didn't follow me, not yet. The rest of the family sat in rigid silence, pretending to be invisible. The poison Vincent had poured into the evening had seeped into every corner of the room. I stepped outside into the crisp October air. The night was cool, Portland's autumn wind brushing across my face like a promise. The air out here tasted cleaner, freer. My phone buzzed softly as I unlocked my Tesla. I slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool against my skin. Staring at the glowing screen, my thoughts turned sharp and focused. Vincent had no idea how fragile his empire really was. No idea how much power sat in my hands, power I had always chosen to wield quietly, invisibly. Until now. Inside, he was celebrating his 65th birthday, basking in the attention of his family, believing he had humiliated me beyond repair. But out here in the silence of my car, I understood something he never would. Revenge wasn't about shouting the loudest. It was about patience, precision, and timing. And Vincent Morrison had just given me the perfect reason to strike. By the time I pulled into my driveway that night, the fury in my chest had settled into something colder. Not rage. Not humiliation. Strategy. Vincent thought he had delivered the final word at that dinner table, branding me worthless trash in front of his family. What didn't he know, what none of them knew, was that the trash he dismissed so easily had built an empire of her own. My name is Ruth Peterson. I'm 32 years old, and I didn't come from privilege. Every inch of ground I stood on, I carved out myself. After graduating from Wharton with an MBA in corporate finance, I started Crystalia Holdings, an investment firm specializing in distressed real estate. While my classmates chased safe jobs at big-name firms, I gambled everything on my own vision. I started small, scraping together funds to buy a half-abandoned strip mall in Vancouver, Washington. Everyone thought it was a mistake. Too rundown, too risky, too messy. But I saw what they didn't: location, potential, and timing. 6 months later, that mistake was fully leased out, generating steady cash flow. I sold it at a profit that allowed me to purchase 2 more properties. From there, I scaled slowly, strategically, relentlessly. Within 5 years, Crystalia Holdings managed over $50 million in assets. My portfolio stretched across the Pacific Northwest: commercial buildings, mixed-use developments, and retail spaces. I didn't just survive in real estate, I thrived. My reputation, though quiet, was built on results. But here's the part that still makes me laugh. In all the time Vincent was lecturing me about finding real work and contributing something meaningful to society, I was quietly becoming one of the most influential investors in Portland.
He thought I was just Isaac's wife.
A housewife with too much free time and no real ambition. And that's exactly how I wanted it. Isaac knew I worked in finance, of course, but he assumed I was another cog in a corporate machine, an analyst, maybe a mid-level manager. I never corrected him. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I preferred keeping my business world and my personal world separate. Mixing the two always gets messy. When Vincent's company, Morrison Development, began hemorrhaging money 2 years ago, I noticed. His projects had potential, but his arrogance blinded him to the mistakes piling up. Construction delays, cost overruns, poor financing structures. He was teetering on the edge of collapse when Crystalia Holdings stepped in, quietly, anonymously, through carefully structured shell partnerships. I funneled $2.3 million into his projects. I also leveraged my network, city planning contacts who smoothed the way for permits, construction firms who trusted my track record enough to sign on, lenders who respected my name. Vincent thought his charm and supposed brilliance had attracted this mysterious investor. In reality, I had dissected his numbers, mapped out his weak points, and calculated that with the right support, his projects could yield excellent returns for me. That's the irony. I didn't back Vincent because I admired him. I backed him because I saw dollar signs. To me, he wasn't a father-in-law. He was a case study in profitable inefficiency. And yet, even as he praised this faceless investor at every business meeting, even as he told colleagues that his mystery backer believed in his vision, he never once imagined that person could be me. Why? Because to Vincent, women, especially women married into his family, were ornamental. Pretty faces to sit quietly at dinners, not minds capable of running multi-million-dollar firms. He never connected the dots. The irony became delicious over time. At family gatherings, he'd launch into lectures about the economy, the housing market, or how real estate really works. I'd nod politely, biting my tongue while internally correcting every error in his pompous speeches. He had no idea the woman he dismissed as ignorant was the same one signing the checks that kept his empire alive. And oh, how he bragged about his latest jewel, the Crowne Plaza development. A massive mixed-use project in downtown Portland, luxury condos, retail space, and gleaming office towers. Vincent strutted around like a king, boasting that he alone had secured the investment that would make it possible. That investment was me. Every permit approved, every contractor on board, every cent of seed capital, it all traced back to Crystalia Holdings. To me, to the woman he thought was beneath his son. That's what made his insults sting differently. Not because he called me worthless trash. Words alone can't hurt someone who knows her worth. But because he spat those words while literally sitting across from the person financing his dreams. He looked me dead in the eye, declared I had no value, while eating dinner in a house I had helped him keep when his debts nearly swallowed him whole. If it weren't so insulting, it would have been funny, but I don't laugh off disrespect. For months, I played the role of silent benefactor, the invisible hand steering Vincent's company away from disaster. I told myself it was just business. That his arrogance was irrelevant as long as my portfolio grew. That someday, maybe I'd reveal the truth in a way that forced him to swallow every word of condescension he'd ever spoken to me. That night when he stood up and declared me trash, I realized someday had arrived. His downfall wouldn't require shouting or public scenes. It wouldn't require me to trade insults or fight for recognition. No, his downfall was already built into the foundation of his business. All I had to do was step back and let gravity do the work. Tomorrow, his world would begin to unravel. And when it did, the man who believed I was beneath him would finally understand. I wasn't just his daughter-in-law. I was the investor who had been holding his empire together by a single thread, and I had just decided to cut it. The next morning, the Oregon sky wore its usual gray veil, the kind that hinted at drizzle even when the forecast promised none. I sat in my home office by 7 a.m., a steaming mug of coffee beside me, my laptop glowing with financial reports. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger burns hot and fast. What I felt now was cooler, sharper, like the edge of a blade honed for precision. Vincent had called me worthless trash in front of 23 relatives. He had stripped away the civility I had extended to him for years. And in doing so, he had freed me. There was no longer any reason to keep the mask on, no reason to continue supporting a man who mistook my silence for weakness. On my screen sat the Morrison Development portfolio. The numbers told a story Vincent never bothered to read: massive debt, razor-thin margins, and a single fragile lifeline keeping it all afloat: Crystalia Holdings. Without my money, without my network, without my permits and partners, his entire house of cards would collapse. And I was done holding it up. By 7:30, my attorney Patricia had emailed me a draft of the withdrawal notices, clean, ironclad, every contract between Crystalia Holdings and Morrison Development contained standard exit clauses, clauses Vincent had signed without ever realizing who sat on the other side of the dotted line. All it required was my authorization. I stared at the documents, fingers poised over the trackpad. It would be so easy. Just a few clicks, and the scaffolding propping up his empire would vanish. My phone buzzed. A text from Isaac. "I'm so sorry about last night. Dad was out of line. Can we talk later?" I stared at the message, a strange ache pressing in my chest. Isaac wasn't his father. He was a good man caught in an impossible position, torn between loyalty to blood and love for me. He had no idea that the woman he married wasn't just some finance professional, but the very investor his father spent months praising. I typed back, "I'm fine. At work early. Talk tonight." Work, if only he knew. At 9:30 I called Patricia. My voice was steady. "Send the notices, but I want it done with precision." At exactly 10 a.m., 3 messages go out. "3?" she asked. "Yes. First, his lawyer gets the official withdrawal notice. Second, Isaac receives a text from you, explaining the truth that I'm the anonymous investor his father has been working with. And third," I paused, savoring the thought, "Vincent gets a text from me." 4 simple words: "Don't mess with trash." Patricia was silent for a moment. "Ruth, this will destroy his business completely." "Are you certain?" I leaned back in my chair, glancing out at the city skyline through my office window. Portland stretched wide and restless, full of cranes and half-finished projects. Vincent had spent the last year bragging about his role in shaping this city, never realizing the real architect was sitting across from him at family dinners. "I've never been more certain in my life," I said. Vincent thought humiliation was power. He thought dominance was respect. But true power isn't in words shouted across a dinner table. True power is in silence, in the quiet decision made behind closed doors that shifts the ground under someone's feet. By 9:59, I was watching the clock on my computer screen, my heart steady, my hands calm. The second ticked over. 10 a.m. somewhere across town. Vincent was probably sitting in his office, sipping coffee, reviewing construction schedules, congratulating himself on his brilliance. And at that exact moment, 3 messages detonated in his world. His lawyer, opening the withdrawal notice that ended his project. My husband learning that his wife had been the mystery investor all along. And Vincent himself, reading 4 words that would echo louder than his insult ever could: "Don't mess with trash." I sat back, my coffee still warm, my laptop still glowing, and allowed myself a rare smile. The game had changed. And Vincent Morrison had no idea just how much he was about to lose. The minutes after 10 a.m. passed in silence. I sat at my desk, sipping coffee, watching the Portland skyline through my office window. Outwardly, nothing changed. My phone didn't ring, my inbox didn't explode, but I knew. Somewhere across the city, Vincent's world was cracking. At 10:07, my phone lit up. "Isaac," I answered. His voice was shaky, frantic. "Ruth, I just got the most insane text message. It says, you're the anonymous investor Dad's been working with? That can't be right. That's impossible." "Why is it impossible?" I asked calmly. "Because that investor put over $2 million into Dad's projects. You work in finance, sure, but you're just an analyst. You don't have that kind of money." His voice faltered. "Please tell me this is some kind of mistake." I leaned back in my chair, my tone measured. "It's not a mistake, Isaac. I own Crystalia Holdings. I've been running it for 5 years. Your father's projects have been part of my portfolio for the past 18 months. Silence. A long, stunned silence that stretched until I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Isaac whispered, "You've been supporting Dad's business this whole time?" "Financially, yes. I saw potential in his projects and I invested. But he never knew because I kept my involvement anonymous." Isaac's breathing was ragged, the sound of someone trying to piece together 2 realities that didn't match. "Jesus Christ, Ruth." Last night, Dad spent half an hour praising his mystery investor. He said this person had vision, that they understood quality development. "He was talking about you the whole time." His voice cracked. "He didn't even know. That's the irony, isn't it?" I said softly. "Your father spent months calling his investor brilliant, while treating me like I was beneath him." Before Isaac could respond, another call buzzed in. Vincent, his name flashing across my screen, felt like a storm warning. "Isaac," I said, cutting him off. "Your father is calling me."
"He knows. Don't answer it," Isaac pleaded.
"Please, let's talk first." But I already declined the call. Seconds later, an email notification popped up. Then another. Both from Vincent. The subject lines screamed urgency. "Call me immediately. Misunderstanding. Let's talk." Too late. By the time I turned back toward the door, it was already swinging open. Vincent stormed into my office without knocking, Isaac trailing behind him with a look of defeat. Vincent's face was a mask of panic and disbelief.
His silver hair, normally slicked back, was disheveled. His voice was raw. "This is impossible."
"You can't be Crystalia Holdings. That's a major firm. You're just a housewife?" I finished for him, my tone sharp but quiet.
His mouth snapped shut. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Please sit."
"Or would you prefer I call you Mr. Morrison? Since, apparently, we're conducting business now." He didn't sit. He gripped the back of the chair so hard his knuckles whitened. His eyes darted between me, Isaac, and the glowing laptop screen. "There has to be an explanation. This doesn't make sense. You don't have millions of dollars. You don't run a company." I turned the laptop toward him. On the screen, Crystalia Holdings' website glowed, my photo and biography displayed prominently. Meet Ruth Peterson, Chief Executive Officer and founder of Crystalia Holdings. Managing portfolios worth over $50 million since I graduated from Wharton with my MBA. Vincent's face drained of color. He sat down heavily, collapsing into the chair as though the weight of his arrogance had finally crushed him.
This can't be real, he muttered.
Oh, it's real, I said evenly. Would you like to see the investment records? The spreadsheets showing exactly where your company would be without my money. I clicked through pages of financial data, highlighting charts and projections. You were bleeding out on every project until Crystalia stepped in. I provided capital, contractors, permits, political connections. Without me, you wouldn't have had a single success to brag about. Vincent stared, his mouth opening and closing without words. Isaac, standing by the door, finally found his voice. Dad, every win you've had in the past year? That was Ruth, not you. Ruth. Vincent turned on him, eyes wild. You knew about this? No, Isaac snapped. I didn't know. And maybe that's the problem. Ruth never said a word because she knew you'd treat her exactly like this. You didn't see her because you didn't want to. I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. Last night you called me worthless trash. You told an entire room of people that your son deserved better. You humiliated me publicly. And all the while, I was the reason your empire still stood. Vincent's face crumpled, his arrogance finally cracking. Ruth, please, don't do this. You can't just walk away. The groundbreaking is Monday. I have contracts, commitments. I stood, circling the desk until I stood directly in front of him. Vincent, your commitments mean nothing without me. As of 10 o'clock today, the Crown Plaza project is dead. Your contractors have received cancellation notices. The city has revoked your expedited permits. Your lenders are calling in their loans. I paused, letting each word land like a hammer blow. Your empire is gone. He shook his head violently, denial etched into every line of his face. You planned this. You've been waiting to destroy me. No, I said firmly. I plan to keep supporting you. Your projects were profitable, and I believed in their potential. But at 10:07 last night, I changed my mind. His eyes narrowed. What happened at 10:07? That's when you finished explaining to your family why I was worthless trash. My voice hardened. That's when I realized supporting a man who despised me wasn't just insulting, it was bad business. Isaac exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Dad, do you get it now? Ruth wasn't just some faceless investor. She's family. She believed in you when no one else would, and you destroyed that with your arrogance. Vincent buried his face in his hands.
His phone rang again, vibrating against the desk.
He answered, and within seconds his face turned the color of paper. What do you mean foreclosure proceedings? He whispered. 60 days to cure the default? That's impossible. He ended the call slowly, his hands trembling. Your primary lender? I asked coolly. He nodded numbly. Without Crown Plaza, the loans you leveraged against your other properties are worthless, I explained. The bank is calling them in. That's the reality of building a business on arrogance instead of respect. Vincent looked up at me, desperation swimming in his eyes. Ruth, I'll apologize. I'll make it right with the family. Just give me another chance. I shook my head. You're not apologizing because you respect me. You're apologizing because you're drowning. That's not the same thing. He sagged back in his chair, defeated, his empire crumbling around him. And for the first time in years, Vincent Morrison sat in silence. The storm broke fast. Within minutes of Vincent realizing the truth, my office transformed into ground zero for a financial disaster that spread like wildfire across Portland's development scene. His phone didn't stop ringing. His email notifications chimed like alarms, one after another, each new message a fresh dagger to his already crumbling empire. Patricia, he barked into the phone, pacing the room with a kind of frantic energy I had never seen before. There has to be a way to stop this. No, she can't just walk away. That's not... He paused, listening, his face fell. Standard withdrawal clauses? But He pulled the phone away, staring at it in disbelief as though it had betrayed him. I sipped my coffee, answering emails from other clients as if nothing monumental was happening 2 feet away. Another call came in. Vincent snatched it up. What do you mean the payment was cancelled? Materials already ordered. No, I'll cover it. Just give me time. His voice cracked with desperation. He slammed the phone down, only for it to ring again instantly. City Planning Office?
He muttered, fumbling to answer.
Yes, this is Vincent Morrison. I don't understand. What do you mean my permits are void? That's impossible. We had expedited approval. He stopped mid-sentence, his eyes flicking toward me as the realization hit. Crystalia Holdings withdrew? I smiled politely without looking up from my screen. Vincent's complexion turned a shade paler than paper. Please, he said into the phone, his tone begging now. There must be a mistake. I can fix this. The line went dead. For the next 3 hours, my office was filled with the sound of Vincent Morrison's empire collapsing in real time. Contractors called, furious that payments had vanished. Potential tenants demanded explanations for leases that would never materialize. Bankers, smelling blood, circled with demands for immediate repayment. Every conversation ended the same way, Vincent growing smaller, weaker, more desperate. Isaac sat slumped in a chair in the corner, silent, watching his father's downfall with wide, hollow eyes. He looked torn in half, caught between sympathy for his father and horror at the spectacle unraveling before him. At one point, Vincent slammed the desk so hard the pens rattled.
How much? He shouted into the phone. No, that's impossible.
We had a payment schedule.
He threw the phone down, chest heaving. Then, with trembling hands, he dialed another number.
Patricia, it's Vincent again.
Tell me there's something we can do. Legal action? Injunctions? Anything.
I looked up finally, my tone calm, almost kind. Vincent, you're wasting your money. Every contract you signed with Crystalia Holdings contained standard withdrawal clauses. I made sure of it. What I did this morning was completely legal.
He stared at me, his face twisted with something that looked like hatred, but beneath it was fear.
You planned this, he spat. You've been planning this for months. I shook my head slowly. No, Vincent. I planned to keep supporting you. Your projects were profitable. But last night at 10:07 p.m., you convinced me otherwise. His brow furrowed. What happened at 10:07? That's when you told 23 family members I was worthless trash. My words cut cleaner than any blade. That is when I realized supporting a man who despises me wasn't just insulting. It was bad business. Vincent sagged back into his chair, running his hands through his hair. His phone buzzed again. He answered it with a trembling hand. What do you mean foreclosure proceedings?
His voice cracked. 60 days?
You can't. He listened, eyes wide, then slowly lowered the phone. They're calling in the loans, he whispered. Of course they are, I said softly. You leveraged 3 properties against the Crown Plaza project. Without my investment, that project is dead. The banks don't gamble on arrogance. Isaac finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Dad, do you understand? Ruth wasn't just some faceless investor. She was family. She believed in you. And you spat on that. You did this to yourself. Vincent shot him a look of pure desperation. Isaac, you have to talk to her. Make her understand. Tell her to come back. I cut him off. No, Vincent. This isn't about family loyalty. This is about respect. You praised your mystery investor endlessly, but when that investor sat at your dinner table, you dismissed her as trash. Actions have consequences. You're living them now. His phone rang again. Contractors, then lenders, then business partners. Each call tore another piece from the illusion he had built around himself. By early afternoon, the mighty Vincent Morrison, the man who once commanded rooms, who lectured me on real work, who strutted through Portland like a mogul, was reduced to a desperate man clutching a phone like a lifeline that kept slipping from his grasp. I remained seated at my desk, answering emails for new clients, sipping fresh coffee, every so often glancing up to watch his empire burn down around him. By 3:00 p.m., his voice was raw, his eyes bloodshot, his hands trembling. He had gone from shouting to pleading, from demanding to begging. Finally, he dropped the phone into his lap and looked at me. Ruth, please, don't do this. I'll apologize. I'll fix it with the family. I'll make it right. I stood, walking slowly around the desk until I stood over him. No, Vincent. You'll apologize because you've lost everything, not because you respect me. And that's not enough. I leaned down, meeting his desperate eyes. The truth is simple. You built your empire on my money, my connections, my work. And then you spit on the very foundation holding you up. Now that foundation is gone. And you're watching the walls come down. Vincent's phone buzzed again. He didn't answer. He sat slumped in the chair, shoulders heavy, staring at the floor as though the weight of his arrogance had finally crushed him. Isaac closed his eyes, rubbing his temples, his voice low. Dad, this is what happens when you treat people like they're beneath you. You thought Ruth was nothing. But she was everything. For the first time, Vincent had no words. And for the first time, I allowed myself a smile. The collapse was complete. The collapse didn't stop that day. It accelerated. By the end of the week, Vincent's downfall was headline news in the Portland Business Journal. Local developer faces financial crisis after mystery investor withdraws support. The article was blunt. Morrison Development had lost its largest backer. The Crowne Plaza project was dead before it began. Creditors were circling. Contractors were demanding payment. Banks were threatening foreclosure. It didn't take long for the whispers to spread beyond financial circles. By the following week, every developer in Portland knew the story. Vincent Morrison had built his empire on money from an anonymous investor, then publicly insulted that very person without knowing who she was. And once word got out that the investor was his own daughter-in-law, the gossip spread like wildfire. At networking events, his name became shorthand for arrogance. Don't pull a Morrison, people would say when discussing how to treat investors with respect. At industry conferences, developers told the story with a kind of morbid fascination how Vincent had destroyed himself with his own pride, humiliating the one person keeping him afloat. His reputation collapsed even faster than his finances. Potential partners withdrew from future deals. Contractors refused to sign new agreements. Even the city's planning officials grew cold, wary of attaching themselves to someone whose judgment had been exposed as catastrophically flawed. Socially, the fallout was just as brutal. Family gatherings became battlegrounds of awkward silence and whispered apologies. Patricia, his wife, looked mortified whenever my name came up. She even called me once, her voice trembling, to say she hadn't known I was the investor. If I had known, she said softly, I never would have let him speak to you that way. But apologies couldn't erase what had been done. Isaac's siblings kept their distance too, unable to look me in the eye after watching their father humiliate me at that dinner table. Slowly, the family began to fracture, the tension too sharp to ignore. Vincent had thought his words would unite his relatives against me. Instead, they exposed him as a tyrant, a man willing to demean others to inflate himself. His marriage didn't survive the strain either. Patricia filed for separation 3 months after the collapse, citing irreconcilable differences. Everyone knew the truth. She was tired of being chained to a sinking ship. Financially, the devastation was total. Morrison Development filed for bankruptcy within 60 days. The foreclosure notices arrived in thick envelopes, one after another, stripping away everything Vincent thought untouchable. The downtown office building, the rental complexes, even the Victorian house where he had humiliated me in front of 23 relatives. Piece by piece, the empire he had built, and I had sustained, crumbled into dust. But perhaps the most brutal blow wasn't financial. It was personal. Vincent had always thrived on respect, on admiration, on being the man others envied. Now, wherever he went, people saw not a mogul, but a cautionary tale. At business lunches, former associates avoided eye contact. At industry mixers, conversations went quiet when he walked into the room. His name, once spoken with deference, became a punchline. The humiliation dug deeper than bankruptcy ever could. For me, the irony was almost poetic. Vincent had wanted to prove, in front of his family, that I was nothing. Instead, he revealed himself to be exactly what he accused me of, worthless. Worthless not because he lacked money, but because he lacked respect for me, for his family, for anyone who wasn't useful to his ego. Isaac struggled with the fallout. He loved his father, but he couldn't ignore the truth. One night he sat across from me at our kitchen table, his hands clasped tightly together. Ruth, he said quietly, he still doesn't understand. He keeps saying this is a misunderstanding, that if you just met with him, you could fix everything. He doesn't see that he did this to himself. I sighed, staring into my coffee. That's because he never saw me, Isaac. Not really. To him, I was just your wife, nothing more. Isaac's voice cracked. And the whole time, you were saving him. I was investing, I corrected gently. And when an investment stops making sense, you pull out. That's all I did, but even I knew it was more than that. It wasn't just numbers on a spreadsheet, it was dignity. It was self-respect. 6 months after that infamous dinner, I attended Isaac's cousin's wedding. Vincent wasn't there by then. He avoided most family gatherings, too ashamed to face the whispers. Patricia approached me during the reception, her expression heavy with guilt. "Ruth," she said, her voice low, "I wanted you to know. The family understands now. Vincent was wrong. We all know it. And we know how much you did for him." For us, I accepted her apology graciously, but inside, I knew the damage could never be undone. Vincent had burned the bridge himself. In the business world, he tried to start over, launching smaller ventures, pitching to new investors. But every meeting began the same way, awkward questions about Crystalia Holdings. About me, about how he could have failed to recognize his own investor, and every time he stumbled. Because how could he answer without admitting the truth? That he had called the woman funding his empire worthless trash and lost everything because of it. No one wanted to gamble on a man who had already proven himself both cruel and blind. His legacy, once gilded with ambition, was now marked by ruin. Morrison Development was no longer a name of respect, it was a warning. For me, though. The fall of Vincent Morrison became an opening. Other developers, impressed by how decisively I had pulled the plug, reached out to Crystalia Holdings. They wanted partnerships. They wanted respect. They wanted me. As Vincent's world shrank, mine expanded. The man who once told me I was worthless trash had given me the greatest gift of all, freedom from ever needing to prove myself to him again. And, as his empire lay in ashes, mine continued to rise, stronger than ever. 2 weeks after Morrison Development filed for bankruptcy, I sat in my favorite coffee shop downtown, flipping through the Portland Business Journal. The headline made me smile. Local developer files for bankruptcy after mystery investor withdraws support. Vincent's empire had crumbled in just 14 days. Everything he had built, everything I had secretly sustained, was gone. But I hadn't come to the cafe to gloat. I came to sign contracts. On the table in front of me lay agreements with 3 new development companies eager to partner with Crystalia Holdings. They had heard the story, of course. Everyone had. And while Vincent's arrogance had cost him everything, my decisiveness had earned me respect. The same business community that turned its back on him opened its doors wide for me. Meetings that once required careful maneuvering now came with eager handshakes and genuine admiration. Developers wanted my capital, yes, but they also wanted my vision, my network, and my integrity. Isaac joined me at the cafe that morning, sliding into the seat across from me. He looked tired, but there was relief in his eyes.
"It's official," he said softly. "Dad lost everything."
The office buildings, the rental properties, even the house, it's all gone. I nodded. And how is he handling it? Badly. He keeps insisting this is some kind of misunderstanding. That if he could just talk to you, you'd come back. Isaac's voice carried a bitter edge. He still doesn't get it. Of course he didn't. Vincent had always believed people existed in his orbit to serve him. The idea that I had chosen to walk away, that his humiliation had cost him not just money, but me, was something his pride wouldn't let him accept. Isaac looked down at the contracts on the table, then back at me. 3 new deals, already? Portland's real estate market is booming, I said with a small smile. And there are plenty of developers who know the value of treating investors with respect. He was quiet for a moment, then reached across the table to take my hand. You were right, Ruth, about everything. Dad didn't deserve your support. But I'm glad other people will get the chance to see what I've always known about you. That moment meant more than any headline. Because this wasn't just about Vincent's collapse. It was about my triumph. About finally stepping out from the shadows of anonymity and being recognized for what I had built. I didn't destroy Vincent's empire out of spite. I simply stopped enabling a man who confused my silence with weakness. And when I did, the truth revealed itself. He had never been the mogul he claimed to be. I was. Now, as I looked at the empty lot where Crown Plaza should have been, I didn't feel bitterness. I felt clarity. Vincent's insult had been the spark, but the fire that followed belonged to him. His arrogance lit the match.
His disrespect fueled the blaze. All I did was walk away.
And in walking away, I discovered the greatest revenge of all, thriving while he was forced to live with the wreckage he created. The man who once called me worthless trash had proven himself the real trash discarded by the very world he thought he owned. And me? I was just getting started. Vincent thought he could humiliate me, strip me of dignity, and still count on my support. What he never realized was that respect is the most valuable currency in business and in life. By calling me worthless trash, he didn't just insult me. He exposed himself. All I had to do was step back and let the truth dismantle him. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't shouting back, it's thriving while they crumble. Would you have walked away like I did? Or stayed silent? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to subscribe, and join me for more stories of ultimate revenge.